2 and 1. Hey everybody, Dr. Thompson here with Exemplify Health Center, an affiliate of the Wellness Way right here in Yorkville, Illinois. Happy Monday evening. Guys, I'm using a new microphone, so let me know if you're watching right now, if you can hear everything okay. Just go ahead and leave a comment and give me a thumbs up. Hopefully you guys can hear everything okay. So today I'm going to talk about stress, guys. Everybody knows that stress is a killer. I'm going to explain to you what happens to you physiologically when you have a stress response. And again, I'll always say that stress, a certain amount of stress is good, but when it overflows from the bucket and the body's not able to handle it, is how you enter into an adaptation process. Doctors would call it a disease process. But I'm going to show you how this is an adaptation, okay? So if you are watching right now, make sure that you say hello. I know that we have people watching from all over. I know that we have Arizona, down by Peoria, Illinois. Welcome, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. And again, let me know where you're watching from. I always love to see people watch from around the world, and make sure that you say hello as well. Guys, I'm going to talk about, again, stress. Hear how it is going to kill you. Everybody knows that stress is a killer, but a lot of times they won't be able to understand why. So I'm going to explain to you how stress affects the gastrointestinal system, cardiovascular system, how it affects your hormones. And really, guys, when you talk about stress, I'll talk about physical, mental, chemical, but I'll also talk today a big part about mental stress. The reason why, ladies, since most of our fans are actually ladies, I will show you that the reason why you are having health problems comes down to two things. It's either mental stress or something that's involving the immune system. And it isn't necessarily adrenal fatigue. It isn't necessarily, that you have a problem with your adrenal glands. The biggest problem, guys, that you have is something's affecting the immune system, but then also you have a chronic mental stress response. So I will show you guys how this actually works. And then hopefully at the end, guys, I'm going to give you some tips on what you can do in order to start to handle mental stress. Now, I want you guys to answer in the comments right now. But if I would say who stresses out more, would it be men or would it be women? Go ahead and put your answer in the comments, because most people actually get this right. All right. So who stresses out more? Is it men or is it women? Let me know what your answer is. And I know that there's probably about a 10 to 15 second lag. So I'm waiting for the answers to roll in, and they actually are. Yes, you are right, Sarah. It is women. Women. Someone put men. Interesting. The answer is, in fact, women. However, who stresses out women the most? And the answer is, go ahead and put your answer. And guys, if you are watching this on the replay, you will see the answers stream in. Who stresses women out the most? And yes, here we have the correct answer is men. So guys, when you look at stress, who stresses out the most? It's women. Who stresses women out the most? It's men, all right? Everybody answers that question correctly, but it is true that women do in fact stress out more than men. It's not a deficiency of women. It's not a fault of men. It's how we're built hormonally, okay? Men and women are different, and we are unique. And so many times that because we're so hormonally different, most women and most men don't understand their hormones, and they don't understand how they're built, which is why you try to have a woman act like a man and a man act like a woman, and they are left confused because they're like, that it doesn't feel right. That's not how I am built. So yes, guys, men and women are different. They're different hormonally, and they're actually designed to complement one another. So let's talk about stress, because I will tell you this, that if you understand hormones, stress from a woman's perspective will absolutely devastate her hormones, and it won't affect a man as much. And I'm going to explain to you why when we talk specifically about hormones. So while we are watching people jump online right now, again, make sure that you let us know where you're watching from. Make sure that you say hello. And also, while people are jumping on, guys, you can always watch the replay of this video. You can always go back on YouTube. You can go back on Rumble as well. We're streaming live right now to YouTube, but we have all of these live videos archived on YouTube. So you can go, a lot of times people say, I want to share this video with someone. They're not on Facebook. They're not on this specific social media platform. So you can watch the replay back on YouTube. And guys, for some reason, if it gets taken down, like some of our videos, actually our most popular videos have been taken down off of YouTube, you can always go back and you can watch this on Rumble, because Rumble will not suppress, especially things when we are talking about truth. So a lot of the videos that we have had taken down, over 1 million views, they were on YouTube taken down, but they are still on Rumble and available, because a lot of people have asked me about the immune system. Guys, a couple of things on YouTube that have gotten taken down are actually the initial video that we did about pre and post you know what and blood work and immune system panels. Also one that just got taken down recently because I think I'm flagged. The whole immune system webinar that we did, it's about an hour and a half long. That is on Rumble, but YouTube took that down within actually 15 minutes. So guys, let's get into it while you are joining us. Again, one last announcement, inflammation talk. I have people all the time that say, hey doc, how do I work with you? I said, get to an inflammation talk because once you understand inflammation, you understand how we think differently when it comes to health. And just like I said, the biggest things that are going to involve a woman is going to be something involving the immune system, which means inflammation. But then the other thing is going to be due to stress. So guys, if you understand inflammation, where it is coming from, and how actually to be avoiding inflammatory triggers, you will not heal, guys, until you understand what inflammation and where it's coming from and how to start avoiding it. Because guys, your hormones are really playing off of the immune system, and they're playing off of stressors. I just had a woman today has a very low immune system function, which is one of the things I'll talk about today, how it wrecks the immune system, but low immune system function and also very, very low in hormones. I took one look at her and I said, tell me about the stress in your life. And it was as if the floodgates open. So stress is a real thing, guys. It's not some, like, I need to get my stress in order. You can measure this as far as not only what your stress response is, but how your body is reacting to stress, which is why, guys, you got to get it under control, or else it is going to kill you. Okay. Let me start by saying this, is that being stressed is not a badge of honor. And if you being stressed, you being busy, and always talking about, how stressed you are, guys, you have to stop wearing that as your badge of honor. Being stressed does not give you more significance. And in fact, over the last 10 or 15 years, I would say I have been really, really, really stressed. And in fact, probably so stressed. And this is a fault of mine. I'm going to go over this because a lot of things I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be preaching to the choir. But a lot of the stress was I didn't feel I was important unless I was stressed with important things. But guys, when you get to a point where you are being stressed Monday through Friday, only to have to rest and recover on your weekends, not enjoy your weekends, it means that you are too stressed. So guys, we have to stop this whole stigma of, the busier I am and the more stressed I am, the more important I feel, because when it's affecting your health, that is something that is going to be to your tremendous detriment. And one of the reasons why, guys, and I think this talk is actually really important because I think this is one of the highest stress times of the year, being the holiday season, being the Christmas season, is that people do undergo a tremendous amount of mental stress for various reasons. Not only are we busy right now, we got a million things that are going on, but also because of lost loved ones and things like that. Because I'm going to ask you a question, because at the end, I'm going to talk about a couple of things when it comes to mental stress. Because I will say this, ladies, if you do not get your mental stress under control, you will stay very sick. It doesn't matter what you do as far as trying to support your hormones. It doesn't matter what you're trying to do in order to help your leaky gut. Because if you do not get your stress under control, it's very, very hard for you in order to get any kind of long-lasting change when it comes to your health. And so one of the questions I want to ask you is, do you suffer from the disease of self-importance? Dr. Nate, what do you mean about self-importance? Well, one of the reasons why we stress, one of the reasons why, even in my life, I can be frank and be honest with you, is because a lot of people, so many people on social media, they want to talk about how perfect everything is in their life. They want to talk about how perfect everything is, how they got everything under control. But I will tell you something that in my past, and this has been a journey for me over the last year or two, is suffering from this whole disease of self-importance, meaning this is that I can fix anything, I can fix anybody, and I can control everything in my life, and that includes other people. And guys, the reason why we call it self-importance is because you actually have the goal to think you are that important to be able to control everything around you. And guys, if you want to exhaust people, everyone around you, and exhaust yourself, try to control every situation around you and try to control other people. So ask yourself this question is, do I suffer from the disease of self-importance? And guys, one of the most liberating things that I actually found in my own life when it comes to mental stress is to stop thinking I was so important, to stop thinking that I could change everyone, to stop thinking that I could control every situation, and to actually think that I had that much power to be able to control so many different variables in my life. And so, but so many people stress out because they feel that they still can control things, but they haven't made the realization that maybe they actually can't. Okay. So just ask yourself that question, because I'm going to come back to it when we get to the end. Now, guys, is all stress bad? The answer is no, not all stress is bad. So you've heard of eustress, which is good stress, and distress, which they would call bad stress. So is all stress necessarily bad? All stress necessarily evil? No, it's not, because your body does need a certain amount of stress to be able to grow and to be able to adapt. Let me give you an example. You see a weightlifter here. So you need a certain amount of stress in order to stimulate growth, in order to stimulate change. So if this person decided and said, hey, you know what? I'm not going to subject myself to any stress. All I'm going to do is I'm going to lay in bed all day, with my resting heart rate at 50 all day, every day. And what would happen is you would never grow. In fact, you would actually regress. So yes, guys, you do need a certain amount of stress. This is why when you look at exercise, for example, exercise is a stressor. It is a stressor. It can be a good stressor. It can be a bad stressor. But what can actually make it a bad stressor is if you're doing it too much. And number two, if you get all these other stressors in your life that the only thing that's doing is more exercise is just filling up your stress bucket. That's why I say you work on avoiding all of these other stressors, whether mental, chemical, physical, so that you do have enough left in the tank to be able to do a good stressor, which would actually be things like exercise and things like that. So not all stress is necessarily bad, but I want to take you through right now. I'm going to show you the physiological changes that take place when you are under stress. And this is actually kind of all paraphrased from Guyton and Hall's medical textbook of physiology. Dr. Nate, you mean you actually read a medical textbook of physiology? You should open it up. It's absolutely fascinating. It's only like 1,000 pages long, and I've read it from cover to cover. But there's so many things that even doctors, influencers, natural health, practitioners, how they recommend things and it doesn't even follow basic tenets of physiology. Someone actually asked me this earlier today. They're like, what do you think about alkaline water? I said, let me take you through this. So the first thing that you need in your stomach is you need stomach acid because it helps you to break down your proteins. That's a secondary, primary. You need it in order to sterilize your food. And if you've already had problems with having low stomach acid and already developed an H. pylori infection, then why would you want to make it more alkaline in the first place and make it harder for your stomach to have to secrete more stomach acid in order to try to sterilize your food, in order to lower the pH, of that? Why would you want to be having alkaline water? Because the first thing that has to happen is it needs to be acidic in order to sterilize it and be able to break down your proteins. That just comes to basic physiological sense. But a lot of people recommend things that don't make sense physiologically. So let me take you through this whole stress reaction of what takes place. Now, in our approach, one of the first things that we always say is this. We say the body doesn't make mistakes. See, reality is if you're going to a medical doctor, their philosophy is the body messes up. It's genetically, it's everything is caused by bad genes. And I always say, well, what caused the bad genes? It's the environment that actually has to change the genes. And maybe what you're seeing is your lifestyle, that was the environment, actually changed the genetic expression. The doctors say, no, you're just born with that. I say, well, if you're born with bad genes, that should be expressed from birth. Why are you expressing your bad genetic cholesterol at 42 years of age? Why wouldn't you be expressing it at literally from birth? So maybe it's actually the environment that's changing the genetic expression. But within the Wellness Way approach, one of the things that we're saying is what if the body didn't mess up? And in fact, what if everything that was happening was the body trying to adapt to try to help you live longer? See, genetically, we're programmed to survive. Genetically, we're programmed to try to live as long as possible. So maybe everything that's happening isn't the body messing up. It's just saying, I will rob Peter in order to pay Paul, because if I rob Peter now, I'll live now, but I'll die later. So when you look at the biochemical reaction that takes place when it comes to stress, here's what happens, okay? So you have a stressor. Now, this isn't just mental stress. This is also chemical. This is mental. This is also physical. This is why you have to marry all three of these things together. This is why you have the spine, you have the nerve system, you have mental stressors, and then you also have chemical stressors, which is why it's so important when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to food allergies, when it comes to your insulin response, when it comes to your micronutrients, your macronutrients, when it comes to all those different things in relation to chemical stressors. All of those three, you guys probably have one, you probably had two, and many, many people have stressors in all three, which is why you have to lower all of them as much as possible. But here's what's interesting, is that stress is perceived by your nerve system. It's perceived by your brain. It's taken in through your senses. And the senses are your nerve system. Guys, when you talk about hormones, guys, are all originated through the nerve system, through the actual feedback, and then also through things like the pituitary gland that is sending stimulating hormones in order for those hormones to actually be stimulated at the gland level and then to be released. So you have different parts of your brain. You have what's known as the limbic system. Limbic system is largely responsible for actually sensing fear or a stressor. It will send a message to the hypothalamus and then to the pituitary gland, in which that pituitary gland is what is releasing hormones to set up this physiological stress response. So when you have a stressor perceived by your nerve system, there's two things that are happening. Number one, it will send a message down the sympathetic nerve system, sympathetic trunk. So this is actually a trunk of neurons that sit right outside the spinal cord, and it will send a message down there, and it goes to the adrenal glands. And so neurologically, the adrenal glands are responsible for secreting adrenaline. This is when you have a stress response, why immediately you feel the adrenaline dump, or you say, I feel it in my gut. And then a couple of seconds later, you start feeling your heartbeat a lot quicker. This is a response to a stress as perceived by your nerve system. And it can be real, or it could also be a perceived stress. So it's like saying, hey, what I want you to do is I want you to speak in front of 1,000 people. If I told you to do that, immediately you would have a massive stress response. I want you to think about it. Your life's not in danger. It's not like you go up there and you mess up, they're going to kill you, but you're having a stress response because you're afraid of how people are going to perceive you. It's a big difference between the two, because your life is really not in danger. So it sends a message down the sympathetic trunk to the adrenal glands, to the inside, into the medulla of the adrenal gland, and you have this release of adrenaline, which you're going to have an immediate stress response. But from the pituitary gland, you're going to have a hormonal response, which is going to take a little bit more time. And so that's when you have what's known as adrenal corticotropin hormone secreted by your pituitary gland, which is a neurological gland. And then you have the release of what is known as cortisol. Now, so many people will say, oh, cortisol is bad. I need to lower it as much as possible. Guys, if you lowered your cortisol down to 0, I'm going to tell you how you feel. You will feel like how you feel when you have an infection. So if you had COVID, if you have the flu, if you are massively, massively inflamed, cortisol goes way down, guys. And that's why you don't have any energy and you want to rest and you want to sleep all the time. So cortisol isn't necessarily all bad. But when you release cortisol from a stress response, here's what happens. It starts to mobilize your blood sugars, starts to constrict your blood vessels, which means blood pressure starts to go up. It will slow down the digestive process, including it will inhibit the release of stomach acid. Whoa, think about that. You mean to tell me that when I'm stressed, I don't have enough stomach acid, which means I don't break down, I don't sterilize my food the way that it's supposed to, and that the food lasts or stays in the stomach for a longer period of time. It keeps mixing around until finally it's sterilized, finally until the proteins are broken down, and it keeps regurgitating around and around, which is why I get a little bit of acid that comes up in my esophagus that burns. My doctor said it's because I produce too much stomach acid. And let me tell you this, guys, you don't produce too much stomach acid. You're either in fight or flight or rest and digest. You don't get into too much rest and digest in order to secrete stomach acid. But when you're in fight or flight, the stomach acid production goes way down because that digestion in an emergency is not the priority. You will also see tightening of muscles, particularly around the neck and around the upper neck, upper back, in order to protect the spinal cord, to protect the nerve systems. Why you do this. And then you're also going to have a lowered immune system response. Well, that doesn't sound very good, Nate. Actually, it's a great response, because if a bear is chasing you and you fall over and you sprain your ankle or you puncture something, you don't want to have a massive inflammatory response at that time. That is not your priority. Your priority is to get out of the situation and to get out of the emergency. That's why you will actually have a suppressive immune system response when you have a high amount of cortisol that's running through your arteries. So if you look at this, increased blood pressure, increased blood sugar, slowed digestion, low stomach acid, tightening of muscles, having a lower immune system response. And I know what everybody is saying. Well, that doesn't sound like a very good, that sounds like it could potentially be really, really bad. Maybe the body is messing up. Guys, the body never, ever messes up. And in fact, that's the perfect response. It's the perfect response when a bear is chasing you. So think about it. If a bear is chasing me, I am having a perfect response. That's the response that's supposed to happen. But I want you to think of this, is that if a bear was chasing you and you were running away from bear for 10 minutes, finally you got away from the bear and you were able to slip into another building, the bear runs by, can't find you, but there happens to be a doctor in there, a medical doctor, and says, oh, hey, you're due for your blood work. So they go ahead and they do they check your, do a metabolic panel. They check your cholesterol. They check your blood pressure. They check your blood sugar at that moment. Guess what you're going to see? You're going to see elevated blood sugars. You're going to see high blood pressure. You're going to see higher cholesterol. And I want you to think about it. At that time, if that doctor didn't know what you just went through, they would say, you need to be on a statin drug. You need to be on blood pressure medication. And well, we probably can also start to prescribe you metformin to help with your blood sugar sensitivity. And think about it. And you would tell the doctor, you'd say, but doc, do you know what I just went through? And they say, it doesn't matter. This is what the labs say. And you're going to be on these meds for the rest of your life. And this is why, guys, when you look at lab work, there needs to be a lot of context behind it, because you're going to tell the doc, I just had a stress response. And so maybe you're stressed. And think about the last time you went to your doctor and you had all of these elevations, these abnormalities of what they would call it on your blood work, but maybe, just maybe, you were under stress. Maybe you had some kind of mental stressor that was going on. Maybe there's a chemical stressor. Maybe there's a physical stressor. And see, what they want to do is they want to manipulate the effects of a stress response rather than to figure out why you're stressed in the first place. All of those reactions, like I said, are the perfect response. So those are needed, and those things are actually good. If your blood pressure didn't go up, then you wouldn't be able to supply nutrients to your extremities, like oxygen, for example, so that you could run faster and jump higher. If your blood sugars then go up, you wouldn't have a way to be able to mobilize and tap into energy. So all of those things are necessary. All those things are needed. But here's what happens. It's really, really good in an acute crisis, but there's going to be a consequence if the bear never stops chasing you. And that's what's fascinating. Because a lot of times I'll ask people and say, hey, a bear's chasing you right now. Yes, I know that it is. That's the response that I'm getting. But then my next question is tell me how long the bear has been chasing you. Because it's great if it happens for 10 or 15 minutes, but it's exhausting when it's been happening for a year or 2 years or 3 years. So all of those physiological changes are needed. But here is what happens as a long-term adaptation. Because remember, what the body will do is it prioritizes you living right now with the consequence of possibly down the road. But remember, it's always most important to live right now, and then it will handle everything else later on. So maybe all of these physiological changes that you see that the doctor says it's just genetic, maybe it's a response to stress. Maybe it's a response to mental stress. So here is what we would call a long-term adaptation. I hate calling it a disease process because it's really the body just trying to adapt to the situation that you're putting it in. So let's look at the cardiovascular system, okay? So number one, if you are always stressed and you're always mobilizing sugars, then you're going to have a chronic elevation of your blood sugars. So this is why, guys, you look at your A1C and you look at your insulin levels, maybe, just maybe, it's not 100% due to you consuming too many processed sugars. And I was actually listening to a guy on social media, and he said, all of type 2 diabetes, it's genetic because we see people don't eat a lot of sugar, really skinny. And so we know that they don't eat too much sugar. So it's just got to be genetic. Well, guys, if you understand a stress response and how cortisol and adrenaline mobilize sugar to be used as energy, maybe, just maybe, what could also be contributing to your type 2 diabetes is a chronic stress response. That certainly could be one of the things. It could even be due to you chronically over exercising as well. Because remember, you're going to have a stress response from over exercising. So think of this: cardiovascular, insulin resistance, leading to type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure. But what about this? What about having high LDL? Well, my doctor said high LDL is bad and we have to suppress it. Well, guys, if you look at this, again, this is physiology, is that cholesterol makes the backbone of your sex hormones, which means that you need cholesterol in order to manufacture progesterone. You need cholesterol in order to manufacture testosterone. You need cholesterol in order to make your estradiol. And you also need cholesterol in order to make cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So if you are stressed, could your LDL actually go up in order to supply what is needed in order to make cortisol? See, think about it. Do you really think that your liver is just messing up and it's just all of a sudden making too much LDL? LDL is needed in order for you to heal, in order for you to make stress hormone. It's not LDL's fault, but what it is, it's the body reacting to those stressors. So you don't try to suppress LDL. You try to figure out why the body prefers to make more of it and to figure out what those stressors actually are. How about gastrointestinal? Is there a long-term adaptation when it comes to the gastrointestinal system? Yes, because when you have a chronic stress response, you are going to be low in acid. So you will be low in stomach acid. And guys, we preach about this all the time, how important stomach acid is when it comes to sterilizing your food and breaking down your proteins. You want to develop a lot of food allergies, have a chronic low stomach acid position of being in low stomach acid. So yes, you will have acid reflux, which is low stomach acid, not too high of stomach acid. So now you're going to have acid reflux. You're going to want to take your proton pump inhibitors. And we talked about that, I believe, actually last week or the week before, about how proton pump inhibitors actually cause so many other issues. In fact, to mention, we explained to you actually why lowering cholesterol and being on a proton pump inhibitor is a perfect recipe for dementia. Go back to last week's live that we talk about that, about how dementia can be related to certain medications like statin drugs, and then also on proton pump inhibitors or acid reflux medication. So you can develop, because of chronic stress, acid reflux. Guys, the only time that I ever had acid reflux was about a little over 2 years ago. when the whole quote unquote pandemic hit. And when that pandemic hit, between my business, the gyms that currently own, everything, literally everything grinded to a halt. And I was like, we actually have zero money coming in right now. What on earth are we going to do? That was probably one of the most stressful times in my life. And it was the only time that I actually had acid reflux. Okay. Think of this. If you don't have enough stomach acid, you're going to have incomplete protein breakdown into amino acids, which is one of the mechanisms of you actually having multiple food allergies. But then not only that, it's a great opportunity for you to develop gastrointestinal infections or bacterial overgrowths, because remember, the purpose of stomach acid is to sterilize your food. I want you to think about it, is that two people, they go on the same trip to Mexico. One person gets Montezuma's revenge. The other one doesn't. They ate the same food. So they ate the exact thing, the same environment. So what was the difference between one person versus the other? And it had to do with one person's ability to be able to produce stomach acid and the inability of the other one to produce a sufficient amount to be able to sterilize the food. So GI infections are going to be another one. So how about with your hormones, guys? Pay attention to this, because so many people out there, when it comes to men and women, are so turned on by taking hormones from the outside in, whether there are even bioidenticals, whether it's testosterone replacement therapy. Huge, guys. So here's a long-term adaptation when it comes to your hormone system. Number one, probably a lot of you have never actually gotten this test, but if you want to see how stressed someone is, test what is known as reverse T3. So reverse T3, which is standard whenever we test any thyroid panel, because reverse T3 is how the body takes your T4, instead of converting it at T3 within the liver, skeletal muscles, and gastrointestinal system. And instead of turning into the usable form of T3, it can turn it into reverse T3, which is a mirror image of T3. And now you cannot actually use that thyroid hormone. It's how the body puts the brakes on your metabolic output when it comes to your cells. Reverse T3 will actually elevate under high amounts of stress when there is an infection that's going on. And I have seen reverse T3 went very high with people with high amounts of stress. Actually, sometimes when they're getting overprescribed some kind of thyroid replacement as well. And I've also seen it very elevated with people with massive infection and with cancer. So you're going to see elevation of reverse T3. You will also see, with high amounts of stress, menstrual cycle irregularity. Well, what do you mean, Dr. Nate? What are you going to see? Well, one of the things that you are going to see, because remember, on this hormone pathway, is that cortisol, again, is made from pregnenolone, and also progesterone is made from pregnenolone. But if you are under high amounts of stress, remember, the body needs to get out of the crisis immediately. And so it will then be able to shunt all of the pregnenolone into the production of cortisol, which then will rob the body of normal progesterone production. See, guys, if you are low in progesterone, your menstrual cycle will run short, which means in the second half of your actual menstrual cycle, in which you have to see climbing levels of progesterone in order to maintain the endometrial lining. If you are progesterone deficient, it cannot maintain it, which is why you'll start menstruating early, which is why people say, I'm having a menstrual cycle at 23, 24, 25 days, instead of being at 27, 28, 29 days instead. And that's why, guys, progesterone, low progesterone, is the reason why so many women have problems carrying a baby until the first trimester. It's so many reasons why so many female athletes are having problems with normal menstrual cycle. And usually what the doctor says is, well, we're going to put you on a progesterone-based birth control, which is an endocrine disruptor. And they do that to try to get the progesterone levels back up to sufficiency. The answer is not to take an endocrine disruptor. The answer is to figure out why you are so doggone stressed. Yes, it can be mental, it can be physical, it can be chemical. But the other reason why, too, guys, is that this could be because of over exercise as well, which is why you see so many young girls that are suffering right now with their menstrual cycle. So long-term adaptation, let's talk about the immune system as well. What's a long-term adaptation that takes place with the immune system? Well, remember, cortisol suppresses the inflammatory response. It suppresses the immune system. So long-term stress can lead to infection. This is why when people say, I've been so stressed, I haven't been sleeping, I have a high amount of mental stress because it's finals week. Then all of a sudden, when that stressor goes away, people, come down with some kind of massive infection that's going on. A pretty common infection a lot of people get when they're under a high amount of stress. It's actually Epstein-Barr virus. And if you think of Epstein-Barr, chronic fatigue, mononucleosis, guys, this is a pretty relatively benign virus that a lot of people actually have and overcome it without any problems or issues. In fact, if you tested, 90% of people have been exposed to Epstein-Barr virus. But when you are under a tremendous amount of stress, this virus stays in the body forever, and it will start to regrow and start to reemerge because it can't be held in check by your immune system. And then also, if you think of cancer, guys, long-term suppression of the immune system will suppress certain cells that are tumor suppressing. They're tumor suppressing. And I'm actually going to show you a wonderful research article as far as why that is. Guys, this is what's known as a expanded lymphocyte enumeration. Basically what it is, it's considered an AIDS test. They actually measure this in people with HIV because they know that once they start to have a low CD3, CD4, CD8 response, they know that they are going to be very susceptible to tumors and to infection, particularly viral infection as well. So when you look at this right here, you can see someone who admittedly has undergone a tremendous amount of mental stress. When you look at this right here, you look at their mature T cells. Mature T cells, guys, are responsible for viral protection. They're responsible for tumor suppression, and they're also responsible for modulating an immune response between autoimmunity, between identifying between foreign and self. Low in CD3 cells, low in CD4 cells as well, which would be considered kind of the general coordinating this adaptive immune system response, and then low in CD8 cells, which are the sniper-specific cells responsible for destroying tumor cells and also destroying cells that are infected with a virus. If someone has something that's that low, then any virus they will have a problem with. Yes, they'll have a problem with COV, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, they'll have a problem with influenza. Yes, they'll have a problem with RSV. And everyone is all up in arms saying it's the virus, it's the virus, and the virus. No, it's your ability of your immune system to have sufficient cells to be able to fight it off. So you can see that this person's immune system is not in very good shape, okay? So I had an article, and it actually talked about, and I think it's getting blocked by this lab that I did. Let me see if I can go backwards a little bit. But this one right here is being blocked by the labs. But you can see a little bit of what I was talking about in through here. And it talked about a high cortisol stress hormone response and how it induces cell death within your CD4 and your CD8 cells within your thymus gland. See, this is what a lot of people don't understand, is that stem cells will make your bone marrow makes the stem cells. They migrate to the thymus, your T cells, to the thymus for differentiation and to mature. That's why they call them T cells, because where they mature is within the thymus gland. Under high amounts of stress, actually these cells will undergo cell death known as apoptosis. And it kind of makes a lot of sense, because if you are under stress, you don't want to have a high immune system response. So what if this stress is happening for 2 weeks, a year, for a month? Is that all it is killing off those specific cells. And so it will inhibit your ability to be able to handle cancer and also virally infected cells. And heck, actually is one of the things that can also lead to autoimmunity. If you've ever noticed, like man, my autoimmunity gets worse when I'm under a very stressful situation. And this is actually one of the reasons why. So here's another thing. Stress-related Epstein-Barr virus reactivation. This comes from PubMed, which is a basically where you're getting all your peer-reviewed journals from. It's called stress-related Epstein-Barr reactivation. Epstein-Barr virus remains latent in 90% of the patients following primary infection, which means you get an initial infection and for 90% of people, it never ever comes back. But when there is a reactivation, there has to be a massive amount of stressors that can cause immunosuppression to cause those things to start to re-emerge within the body. Here's what they said. There's a significant difference between the rates of acute infection and reactivation among subjects with elevated cortisol and epinephrine levels, okay? Elevated cortisol, elevated adrenaline, basically is what we are talking about. How do those get elevated? Because of stress. So this is why, guys, when you talk about Hashimoto's thyroiditis, when you talk about destruction of the thyroid gland, there has to be a reason why the immune system is destroying the thyroid gland. It will not attack itself, but it will attack a cell if it is virally infected, which is why majority of cases of Hashimoto's, that's true Hashimoto's, truly identified as Hashimoto's, not if you're hypothyroid with Hashimoto's, is it has to do with having a chronic viral infection, and the culprit is, in a majority of the cases, coming from Epstein-Barr. So Dr. Nate, what on earth can I do? I get it. You talked about this ad nauseum. I understand that stress is a killer, and there's so many adaptations that take place when it comes to stress. So what on earth can I do? Okay. So guys, here's the first thing that you can do is reduce everything that increases your cortisol when it doesn't need to be. All right. So everything that is causing an increase in cortisol exposure is you have to get rid of it. You guys know some of the things in your life mentally that is causing an excessive stress response. And I tell people you have two choices. You either have to get rid of it or you have to be able to handle it better. And if you can't get rid of it, one of the ways that you can handle it better is take a whole lot of sedatives like California poppy. So, but the main thing is, guys, is get tested. See, a lot of the testing that we do is actually looking at the body to see how it's adapting to a stress response. This is why we always say, guys, it's physical, it's chemical, and it's mental. And the only profession in all of the healing arts are wellness way doctors that can address the physical trauma, the chemical inflammation, and the mental stressors, and be able to handle all of those things at once. See, too many times that everybody thinks it's just nutrition. So many times people think, well, it's just going to see my psychologist. And so many times saying, well, I only go and see my chiropractor. But we actually are able to test all of these things and be able to give you a holistic approach. Anything else is not a holistic approach. It's just one leg of the whole entire picture. So what does it mean by physical? This is like x-rays, guys. So x-rays are huge. X-rays are important. And in fact, guys, there's been awesome miracles that we've seen place when people have a tremendous amount of physical trauma, and that all of a sudden they say, oh my goodness, look at what has happened. I don't have acid reflux anymore, or I don't get sick the way I'm supposed to. My allergies started to go away. What kind of witchcraft are you doing on me? But the answer is very simple, is because this right here, when someone has an x-ray, it looks like this. The spinal cord, brainstem is non-stressed. And in this position, it is getting stretched, and it is getting taut, and it's getting tight, and it is a stressor on the brain. Very easy to understand that. This is why getting x-rays are very important. And then number two, another physical way too, in which you can have too much cortisol, is how much you exercise. And this is why ladies, we see it all the time, ladies stress out more than men, but then also you start adding on 4 to 5 times a week of steady state, long duration exercise in which it's going to chronically elevate your cortisol levels. Now you are actually causing more cortisol production, more cortisol exposure that then can start to rob from your progesterone. So this is why, guys, when it comes to exercise, I even own a gym, and you have no idea how many people, and women especially, that I said you really need to tail it back significantly on the exercise until you're able to heal. And the reason why we know that is because we've tested them correctly. So how about chemical? So how about chemical stressors? I will also say this, guys, watch your sugar intake. Dr. Nate, I don't eat a lot of sugar. You probably do. We're not talking about the finely granulated white powder, that is very addictive. No, I'm not talking about cocaine. I'm talking about, the United States #1 addiction, which is sugar, and then also everything that quickly turns to sugar. And so when we talk about sugar intake, we're talking about, yes, sugar, but we're talking about very small chain carbohydrates. So it's not just sucrose, it's glucose, it's any short chain sugar, like what is going to be in refined grains. It will also be that as well. This is one of the reasons why, even for some people, I say get rid of fructose, because your liver is not handling it very well until your liver can actually heal. This goes into sugar and fatty liver and things like that. But guys, if you want to lower your cortisol too, is watch your sugar intake. Okay. Your insulin and your A1C, guys, insulin levels should be 3 to 5. Your A1C should actually be under 5.4. Go back to the video that I went over about brain atrophy and having A1C levels that are over 5.4. And then also, guys, sleep. Now, sleep should be 8 to 10 hours. Men can sleep 8 hours. Women who say, hey, sleep 9 hours, the reason why is because women are getting more of a contribution of their hormones coming from their adrenal glands. So you need time in order for those hormone pools to be able to fill back up. And that happens when you are sleeping. So one of the things that happens, guys, when you start skimping on your sleep is that, #1, being awake will leave your cortisol elevated for a longer period of time, which requires more cortisol output coming from your adrenal glands. But the other reason is when you heal is actually when you sleep. So it's like, how long do you want to be healing for? Do you want to be healing for 8 hours, or do you only want to be healing for 5 or 6? So this is why prioritizing sleep is so important. Everybody talks about it, but no one really understands why. And it has to do with cortisol exposure, and it also has to do with the release of melatonin when you are sleeping, which is actually your repair and your healing hormone. Guys, you would be amazed how many people aren't getting enough sleep, and it's something that doesn't even cost you a penny. Now, even when you're talking about mental, you can actually test your cortisol output, in which you see this over here. So you can test your cortisol rhythm. It's a 4-point cortisol test. You measure it in the morning when you wake up. You also measure it in the early or late morning. You do it in the afternoon, and then you measure it at night prior to going to bed. So this is known as your cortisol rhythm. It should follow in between these black lines in through here. Excuse me. So when you see this person, you can see how elevated it is when they wake up in the afternoon or in the late morning, and then you can see still elevated in the afternoon, and then absolutely tanks at night. And you can measure free cortisol and also metabolize cortisol. You can see how high this is. Is this person in a massively stressed state? The answer is absolutely. This person actually came in complaining of estrogen dominant type symptoms, and her hormones will never recover unless she starts to get the mental stress aspect of it under control. So you can test the cortisol rhythm, but for people who are really bad, yes, you can actually even block a stress response. When people are undergoing a tremendous amount of psychological stress, this is why we say, I want you to take California poppy, and I want you to dose it throughout the whole entire day in order to, if we have to, knock down chemically the stress response as much as possible by having you take a sedative. In California poppy, we're not talking about an illicit drug. We're talking about the constituents from a flower and how it acts as a sedative within the brain. So guys, where your stress is originating from is within the brain. So this is why you want to block it from the brain and communicating that stress response to the actual adrenal glands. Okay. Now, lastly, I will tell you this, guys, because it's physical, it's chemical, it's mental. And so I want you to think of this. So ladies, you have to start addressing mental stress. Guys, yes, you should be as well, but it's not going to affect you as much, especially when it comes to your hormone system. So mental stress tips, these are tips that I actually wrote for myself, and you're welcome to follow along if you would like to, okay? But once you guys understand this, because I'm actually a person that self-reflects quite a bit. And so here's some things that hopefully I've gotten benefit from, and you can get some benefit from as well. Number one, I will tell you this, you're not the center of the universe. You are not the center of the universe. The quicker you realize that you are not the center of the universe, the quicker you'll be able to let things go and stop trying to control other people. There are so many people who think I can fix this person, I can fix this situation, or they always think that everyone is thinking about me. Guys, you know how stressful it is that you think that everyone is thinking about you and talking about you. And if you suffer from self-importance and you suffer from thinking that you are the center of the universe, you're always going to think that people are out to get you and that people are always talking about you. I'll give you a perfect example. Guys, at our gyms, what we do is very difficult. It's very tough. The number one thing of why people don't come in talking to people is because I don't want to look bad. I don't want to make a fool out of myself. And I want you to think of this. If everyone is thinking that about themselves, I don't want to look bad, the only person they're thinking about is themselves, which means you go into the gym, no one's caring about you, no one thinks about you because they're only worried about themselves. And so you have to understand that I am not at the center of the universe. And that is one of the most liberating thoughts, especially in my life. Number two, not every event is a bear. So you have to stop overreacting to specific situations. Guys, you are the umpire. You get to choose if stress is stress or not stress. Just like an umpire calls a ball and a strike, it's not stress until you decide to call it stress. Number three, you have to stop micromanaging. Okay. Now, I know when certain people come in that are micromanagers. And the first thing that I will tell them is I will say, because they want to take a lot of notes and they have to get everything right and everything perfect, I say, put your notes away. I want you to understand the big picture. You don't need to know every single detail. But I will tell you this, I was a chronic micromanager because I had to have control over everything. And it's one of the most exhausting, stressful places to be in your life. And if you are a micromanager, let me tell you this, because this is from my own experience. If you are a micromanager, you are exhausting to other people. They find you exhausting. You are inhibiting their personal growth because you're always trying to manage them. You will never let them make mistakes and be able to learn and grow on their own. And you are massively limiting another person's growth, whether it's your spouse, whether it's an employee, whether it's a fellow employee, whether it's your children. You have to stop micromanaging. The only way to grow is to sometimes actually allow for mistakes to be made. Number four, don't make other people's issues your issues. I had to learn this the tough way. But think of this. How many times do you have a beef with another person and you want your friend to also have that same beef with that other person? And so you look at that other person and say, look at what they did to me. Now you must also be angry at them. And I remember a huge thing is that someone said, listen, life is hard enough to try to figure out how I'm supposed to act according to your feelings. And it's also complex enough, it's too complex. I am not responsible for how you're feeling towards that person. I don't have a beef with that person, so I will treat them accordingly. So don't make your beefs, don't make your issues other people's issues as well. And then the last thing, guys, this is so important because I see this so much on social media, is everyone talks about self-care. Today is a self-care day. Today is me laying in bed, watching movies, going to the spa, or doing all of these fancy things. It has to be self-care. I need a self-care day. I need, every 3 to 4 days. And guys, I will tell you this, you need more self-reflection than you do self-care. And if you are finding that you need self-care all the time, then the problem is you're creating the situations to need the self-care. You're creating the stress for you to need to run away from it. So instead of actually having self-care, have self-reflection instead, because at the end of the day, if you don't self-reflect, you just keep making the same mistakes over and over, and you'll never learn. So these are some of the mental stress tips that helps me a ton. And I've had the ability to be able to let things go, to be able to hand things off to other people, to not 100% need to be perfect all of the time. And anybody who expects perfection, they never have your best interest in mind anyway. So take that, guys, to heart, especially during the holiday season. And guys, if you're from the Chicagoland area and you want to know exactly how you start tackling some of these issues, just like I went over today, I want you to get registered for our inflammation talk coming up. I believe the date is January 12th, which is a Thursday, 6 o'clock. This is an in-person event. And at that event, we're going to talk about inflammation and how it leads to problems with weight loss, resistance, cancer, thyroid disease, arthritis, hormone issues related to infertility, type 2 diabetes, hormone issues, autoimmune conditions, and things like that. And guys, the first thing that you have to do is you have to be able to handle inflammation. Inflammation is the scab that you keep re-injuring it, and it will not heal if you keep re-injuring it. And that's why in order for you to heal from any of these different things, you have to know what inflammation is and where it comes from and what is actually triggering the immune system to have an inflammatory response. But remember this, the body never messes up. The body never makes a mistake. How the body responds is perfect, but we also stress the body too much because we don't understand what's actually triggering it. So make sure you guys go to the top of the page to get registered for that event coming up. You'll see a link on Eventbrite. Go ahead and register for that right now. When those seats are gone, they are gone. Next week, guys, I probably will be going over something. It might be a question and answer. So we'll have a post coming up about any questions that you might have that we can answer the day after Christmas. Guys, if I don't see you before Christmas, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas time, a Christmas holiday season. I hope you remember the reason for the season as well. And I hope you enjoy your family, but I also hope that you enjoy this time of year with a whole heck of a lot of stress. So guys, thank you very much for watching. I'm always humbled when you watch. Be well, be blessed, and remember who you are.